Hello everyone and welcome to a new vlog. As you can see from the title of this video, I'm going to be talking about my history with anxiety. And this is a video that I've wanted to film for quite a while, but I wasn't sure if it was a good idea or not. I really like watching other people's vlogs where they talk about their anxiety struggles. However, I also know that sometimes when people who are anxious watch videos like this, it can cause them to feel more anxious about things that they didn't worry about before. I don't want that to happen to anybody. So if that is you, I do encourage you to skip this video. But yeah, I did decide to film this because I think that it can be really helpful to see what other people are going through and kind of just to have your experiences validated, because sometimes it can be scary and feel like you're the only one experiencing things like this and there's something wrong with you when it's more common than you think. So yeah, I apologize if this video is long and rambly. I'm going to try my best to stay on track, but sit down videos like this are not my forte, so we'll see how it goes. I remember very vividly the first time I ever had a panic attack. However, I actually think my anxiety was going on before that. I remember in like kindergarten and first and second grade that I was very anxious to go to school. I just have this feeling of dread and I don't know, just a sick feeling in my stomach about having to go to school. And I think that was the start of my anxiety. But the first time I had a panic attack, I was in English class in, I don't remember if it was third or fourth grade, but we were sitting in class and we were reading a book together. And what we were doing is my teacher had us go around the room with each student reading a paragraph. And when it became my turn, I started reading and then something happened. My heart rate must have gone up really high and I couldn't catch my breath as I was trying to read. So I was unable to read the words on the page and I was shaking. And my teacher just looked at me and asked if I was okay, and I couldn't really talk, and then she just moved on to the next person. And thinking back on this now, it's kind of weird because I don't remember my teacher trying to talk to me about this after class or sending me to the nurse or anything, which I feel like that's probably what should have happened. But I mean, maybe it did and I just don't remember, but I don't think it did. So that was the first time that I experienced a panic attack and it was terrifying. I didn't know what was going on. I was really embarrassed because it happened in front of my entire class and people were asking me what had happened. Like my classmates were asking me what had happened afterwards, and they thought I was like sad, like we were but they thought I was sad about what we were reading, but it wasn't a sad story, so they were confused. And yeah, it was really weird and I didn't know what was going on. But at that point, I not only realized that I was scared of reading in front of people, but I became scared that when I was going to be called on to read something, that would happen to me again. So I was not just scared of reading in front of people, but I was scared of having that experience again. So I never really knew if this fear that I developed of public speaking was the speaking itself or the fear of having a panic attack in front of a bunch of people again. But yeah, so that was the start of my panic disorder, and this went on all throughout the rest of elementary school, into middle school, and into high school. I was terrified of having to read in front of the class or do presentations. It got really bad in high school because we had to do more presentations, group presentations, etc. And I would just freak out. I would be nervous for weeks leading up to the presentation, and then on the day of the presentation, I wouldn't be able to focus on anything. I would be super stressed out, and when it came time to do the presentation, I would be shaking, I would be sweaty, and I wouldn't be able to think straight. And probably should describe, that is basically what happens when I would have these panic attacks. It was as if my mind couldn't focus on what I was supposed to be doing. It would be spinning in circles. Like I felt like I was thinking about a million things at once, and my heart rate was super high, so I felt like I couldn't breathe properly. So I wasn't unable to read. I was physically unable to speak out loud because I just couldn't catch my breath. and I was sweating and shaking. And I remember one time, I think I was a freshman in high school, in English class, we were doing a group presentation, and it was just like a really relaxed one. We just like prepared for it in class that day and had to get up and present at the end of class, and it was supposed to be really chill. And I had little flashcards that I was supposed to be reading, only like a few of them. It wasn't like a big speech or anything like that. And I had a panic attack. I could not read what was on my cards, and I started like rambling because I panicked, and I don't know if I was even saying anything coherent, but I think my classmate who was in the group with me got really upset, and he's just like, "Are you done yet?" And I said, "Yep," and then he just took over the presentation. And it was super embarrassing because at that point I was a freshman. I didn't know a lot of people in the high school, and I had that happen in front of everybody. So yeah, that was an issue all throughout high school. And I was really, I mean, I probably not by choice, but my parents and my professor and my teachers always made me go through with the presentation, so I never got out of things because of this fear that I had. And it was just frustrating because you would think that after doing something so often that you would, you know, be able to find ways to deal with it better, and that just wasn't happening with me. I wasn't getting better at it. I was still super stressed out anytime I knew that a presentation was coming. And another thing is that after I got through a presentation, I would be so sick that I wouldn't be able to focus or do anything the rest of the day. My muscles would just be aching. It was like I had a fever. And you know, I couldn't, so I hated, I mean, I always wanted the presentations to be at the beginning of the day so that I didn't have that whole day of being super anxious about them. But when they were, like, the rest of the day, I was just exhausted and dead, and I couldn't focus on anything. So that was also frustrating. And this kept going on, like this has been ongoing all throughout high school and into college. I don't do any presentations now, but I probably, if I had to, it would be the same experience for me. And that's what I consider like my first phase of anxiety that I had. When I was in college, a senior, I suddenly developed a new anxiety towards my allergy. So I have an allergy to shellfish. I have to carry an EpiPen around with me. However, I've had it since I was 8 years old, and I never really thought about it. You know, I had my EpiPen when we'd go out to eat, and I just wouldn't eat seafood, and I was fine. Like, I never really worried about it. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I just developed this strong fear that I was somehow going to eat shellfish and my throat was going to close up and I wouldn't be able to breathe. So it was really like this fear of not being able to breathe and that my throat was closing up and I wasn't going to get to the hospital. And it was just really weird because it started off like just when we would go out to eat. So if we would eat somewhere, even though I knew that I had not eaten any shellfish, I would get this feeling in my throat that it was tightening up and getting like tingly. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, my throat is closing. And I would go into a panic attack. I would get super hot and like I'd have to leave the restaurant. And after that, I never wanted to eat out because I had this every single time that we would go to a restaurant, and it just made me not enjoy the experience. Like, I didn't want to go out to eat, pay money for food, and then just be miserable and stressed out the whole time. And then it got worse to the point where I would be eating at home and I would get this sensation that my throat was closing. And that I to this day, I have no idea why, because obviously I'm in my house, I know what I am cooking, and I can see that there's no cross-contamination, but I'd be eating and then I'd get this feeling in my throat that it felt like it was tightening up and it was closing, and I would start panicking. What I would do is I would go take a shower and sit in the shower with the steam until I'd calmed down and my throat felt normal again. And honestly, it's probably just like a spice in the food that I was eating that was like making my throat feel funny, but because of that sensation, I would start panicking and then that would make it worse, and it was just like this secular event. That went on for several years where it was pretty bad. Today, that doesn't happen a lot to me. It happens every once in a while, but I've been able to, and I'm not exactly sure how I did this, but I've told myself that these feelings are normal. What I'm feeling in my throat, like it's happened so many times and I've been okay. And somehow that like clicked in my brain, and now when it does happen, I'm usually fine. I understand that that's just a sensation that happens and it's gonna go away and I'm gonna be okay. Sometimes on rare occasion I will have an anxiety attack, but it's very rare. And usually it would only happen if I was eating at a restaurant that did have seafood and, you know, I was just having a really bad anxiety day. So I graduated from undergrad and started a graduate program, and during this time I developed a whole new level of anxiety that I had never experienced anything like before, and it was related to my health. So I never realized this before, but I guess I've always been kind of nervous going to doctors and in medical settings. But, you know, it's just something like, you know, you get a little nervous, you go there, and then you're fine afterwards. But one time I went to the doctor I think I had like a cold or something, and I was so worried that like fluid was building up in my lungs. I just had this weird anxiety that something was going to be wrong and they were going to listen to my breathing and be like, oh my god, you need to be on all this medicine. And I don't know why I thought that, but that was what was going on in my mind. And when I got there, the doctor or the nurse had taken my heart rate, and it was at 180 beats per minute, which is extremely, extremely high. And she freaked out. She thought that I had something wrong with me. She asked me how many cups of coffee I had drank, and she told me that I needed to go to the hospital and get some images taken of my heart. And so I, of course, was freaking out, and I did that, and everything came back fine. I think I got an EKG and another one. I can't remember what the other one's called. It was 2 different tests, and they were both fine. And so I was pretty stressed out after that, but I guess I just never really thought about it. For a while afterwards I was fine, until I had another incident where I had to go to the doctor, and this time it was a doctor at my college. And I went there and they took my heart rate, and it was almost at 180 again. And this doctor also freaked out, and she told me that I had to go to the emergency room. And I was so stressed out. I started crying. I was freaking out. And Andrew was with me at the time, and he knew that it was my anxiety. Like, he was pretty certain, but of course, like, we're not doctors, we don't know what's going on. And I was like, what if the doctor's right? What if there is something wrong with me and they didn't capture it on the first test that they did like a few months prior? So I was rushed to the emergency room, and I didn't have like anyone with me. I was by myself, obviously. They picked me up in an ambulance and they put me on a stretcher, and and they were like surprised that I could walk on my own. Like, I walked over to the wheelchair before they put me onto the stretcher, and it was just like, they were just like shocked. They thought that there was something really wrong with me, and I was just like, I was terrified because I don't like being by myself in new settings, and I don't like medical settings. And so I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna die. And so they took me to the emergency room. I was in triage for a very long time. I saw they had put, like, they gave me like paperwork, and they had written down what they thought it might be, and I was like, oh my god. And I was trying to Google it, and it was something with my heart that it would need like surgery. So I was like freaking out. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have something wrong with my heart. Like, this isn't good. And I got into a room, and they did a bunch of tests on me, and the test came back fine. It was just kind of weird because I guess they had given me a few different medications, and I was just so stressed out. The medications weren't working very well. I think they were like anxiety medications, so they thought that if it was anxiety that my heart rate would go down really quickly, and I don't think it was going down to what they thought it should be. But the tests they did of my heart were fine, and A few weeks later, I went back to that original doctor for a follow-up, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, like sometimes like this just happens and people just have really fast heart rates. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. I mean, I can't blame her, but that was just one of the most terrifying experiences I ever had. And after that, I was just like a completely different level of anxious, because I had it in my head that the doctors had missed something and that there really was something wrong with me. And so I started having panic attacks all the time. I was constantly checking my heart rate and like panicking about if it was too high or not. And I was like, I had this fear that, you know, oh my gosh, my heart rate's really high, I need to lower it super quickly or else something's gonna happen to me. And this is something that I still struggle with today. I have not gotten rid of this fear, and it actually like got worse in a way, whereas before, like, I was just worried about, you know, something's wrong with my heart. And then it kind of developed into this just fear in general that I have something wrong with me medically, whether it's my heart or whatever. Like, I was always scared anytime I had a symptom of something. I would go to worst case scenario, I have cancer, I'm dying, like something's wrong with me. And this just got worse when COVID happened. I was terrified of getting COVID, and I would have panic attacks like anytime that I was getting like a sore throat or having like cold symptoms. I would freak out that I was sick. And it always seemed to be really bad at night. I would wake up in the middle of the night having panic attacks, like my heart racing. And it was just really weird because, you know, I was sleeping and like all of a sudden I just wake up with my heart racing, and I was like, so that's not normal. Something is wrong with me. And then I would feel like dizzy and, you know, weak, I guess is what I felt. And so I thought something, I thought something was wrong. My blood pressure was dropping and I was dying. And one time this happened. This was actually shortly after my wedding. I think it was last November. I woke up in the middle of the night and my heart was racing like crazy, and I just felt, I think it's because I was having a panic attack and I felt like super sweaty and hot, but also my skin was feeling so cold. I don't know how to describe it. I felt like really cold and really hot at the same time, and it was that feeling was like freaking me out, and I just felt super like dizzy and weak, and like I said before, like I felt like something was wrong and my blood pressure was dropping and I couldn't like move. It's like my muscles like just were like freezing and stiffening up. And so I got up and was trying to walk, and I thought like I was just losing energy and I was just gonna fall over and just like die on the floor. And I told Andrew like, something's wrong with me, we need to go to the hospital. So I made him take me to the emergency room, and we went there and they checked me out, and they said that my blood pressure was fine, everything was fine, and that I was just having a panic attack. And that was an extremely embarrassing situation because first of all, it was the middle of the night and we had to work the next day, so we were exhausted. And it's just like, I don't know, I live in a small town, so I don't know, it's just embarrassing to have to go to the hospital and it's for a panic attack. But yeah, so this fear of like something being medically wrong with me is like is probably the most severe anxiety that I've ever had. And it's so different from my other anxieties because they were very situational, like being afraid of public speaking. You know, that's something that happens when you have to public speak or when you're like called on in class or something like that. And so it wasn't something that I had to face 24/7. And the same thing with the fear of my food allergy. You know, that was something that I only experienced when I was eating, especially when I was eating out. So like, it wasn't something that was happening all the time. But this fear of just health issues was something that could just come on at any moment. Like anytime I felt something weird in my body, like I just went to worst case scenario. And it was something that I struggled with a lot this past year. Now I feel like it's gotten a lot better because I've developed ways to help like manage it. But up until recently. Like, it was something that happened quite often. Like, I'd wake up having panic attacks several nights a week. It seemed to be in like waves. Like, I'd go through periods of time where I would be completely fine for several weeks, and then all of a sudden I'd have like a really bad week where it would happen a few times. And so it was kind of weird. But something I did forget to mention, after I started developing this health anxiety, I decided to start taking anxiety medication. And this is something that I had been so scared of my whole life. I, for some reason, did not want to be on medication. I thought that it was going to be addictive and like have all these side effects, which I'm sure it could, but I was also very uneducated about medicine and science in general. When I was younger, I was like an anti-vaxxer. I didn't believe in medicine, and I was like, I wanted everything to be holistic. And I've changed my opinion on that, obviously, as I've become more educated. But yeah, so I started taking citalopram, and that has helped me so much. I'm so thankful that I started taking that. But I guess like why I wanted to make this video so badly is because to show like the different ways that anxiety can manifest, and also like how anxiety can give you physical symptoms that seem so, I mean, they are real. They don't seem real. They are real, because a lot of times people who don't experience anxiety or panic attacks don't realize that you are experiencing these physical symptoms. And so it can be kind of like a mind game for you. Like, am I experiencing this? Like, what's going on? Like, and people not necessarily believing you. So I think it's important to talk about that, and also like for you to realize that other people are going through things similar to you. Of course, like everyone experiences things like this different. Everyone has different fears and anxieties and reasons for having panic attacks, but like knowing that you can have such severe physical reactions because of anxiety has helped me a lot, because I realized, you know, nothing is necessarily wrong with me. Like, yes, I have anxiety, but like nothing is physically like severely wrong with me to the point that, you know, like I'm dying. And it's good to know that like these sensations are like a symptom of anxiety and nothing else. Unfortunately, I still think that anxiety today is so misunderstood and stigmatized, so I think it's really important to talk about these things and share them with others so that we can learn from each other. I'm not used to talking so much in one sitting. I'm losing my voice. But that is where I'm at with my anxiety now. I'm definitely going to make more videos to talk about how I kind of manage my anxiety, because I have a lot of things that I do that really, really help. I'm in a much better place now, and yeah, so that will be coming up in the future. I hope you guys found this helpful and interesting. Feel free to comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this video.